Welcome to the Drupal, excuse me, the Drupal usability meeting for Friday, December 11th, 2020. I'm Ben J. Fisher, and also on the meeting are, is it Paul Driver?
That's correct.
All right, and Aaron McHale.
Hello.
And I know that Paul has requested that we look at one issue.
Thomas is here as well.
Oh, Thomas. Welcome. Thank you for joining. So let me get the right issue. So Paul has asked that we review 3179666 inline form errors module. Advises that a failed login attempt with the wrong password is because of providing the wrong username. Aaron, Thomas, do you have any issues that you'd like to talk about?
No, thank you.
I was reviewing the previous meeting where we looked at, I wasn't able to make it, but we looked at the issue around the sort of book title, and I thought that the discussion was great. I just wondered if it also made sense to add a description to that particular checkbox that we had, or that yourselves had looked at. So that was the only thing from me, was just to maybe sort of look at that one again and just see if it made sense to add a description field.
Okay, so let's start with Paul's issue. Paul, would you like to share your screen?
Yeah, sure. Okay, is that working for you?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, what happens here? This is I would describe this as a core bug. I'll provide.
This is the issue we discussed last week.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I've got it here. I'm sorry. Yes, sorry, got my tabs mixed up.
Okay.
Right, quite simply, when you've got the inline form errors module enabled, and with particular reference to the user login form, if somebody has a failed login attempt, for example, they've got the password wrong. On the one hand, we have here the inline form error, which correctly says unrecognized username or password. But we also get this status message appear here as well, which quite clearly says that a mistake has been made with the username. So I come across this a couple of times before, actually, but I had this a few weeks ago with a client, and dropped me an email, phoned me up saying, can't log in, you've changed my username. And I thought, well, no, I haven't actually, but she got a password mixed up, simple as that. But she was, she got a bit cross with me, actually. She was quite adamant that for some reason I had changed her username. I said, I haven't, you've just forgotten your password. He said, no, it's telling me the username is wrong, and I know that the username I'm entering is correct. So that's the background of it, and the bug actually arises from the inline form errors module. Now, what's actually happened here is that this bug was first reported, here we go, back in 4th of October 2015. Screenshots pretty much the same as mine, explaining, illustrating the problem there. And the issue was being taken seriously, quite a lot of efforts to look at it, which also involved the accessibility team as well. Patches were created to resolve it. And as we progress the issue on, it comes to an end here because a decision at that time was made to move the functionality of inline form errors out into a standalone core module, which is disabled in a default install. But when this issue then got closed out because of creation of inline form modes, effectively all the history of this bug kind of got extinguished with it. The efforts there then to develop the inline form errors as a standalone module progressed, I understand, quite quickly. Again, accessibility team involved and so on, quite a number of core maintainers. And long story short, the module was completed, made part of core. But at no point in this issue is the bug with the user login failed logins brought up. So it kind of just got forgotten about, I guess. Very easy to demonstrate it. So here I've got a vanilla Drupal 9 installation here, Olivero theme, just move my thing. And if I go to do a login here, oops. Now, first of all, and I'm just going to put an incorrect password in. Okay, so inline form errors is not enabled here. So there isn't an inline form error message here, but the status message quite clearly says unrecognized username or password, and so on. So I'm just going to open up terminal window here, and I'm going to enable inline form errors. So just take a moment on my aging MacBook Pro. Okay, so that's enabled now. I'm going to flick, I'll keep this open so that we can come back and look again. I'm going to go to another tab, and once again I'm going to fail a login attempt. So now it's telling me quite differently, saying that an error has been found, that I've entered the username incorrectly. Which, you know, for somebody, a user taking it literally as my client did the other week, what actually followed there with her in this particular case, before getting on the phone to me, you know, a little bit cross and a bit worn out, she tried lots of, tried a number of different usernames that she thought, you know, whatever. And after 5 unsuccessful attempts, of course, she then gets flooded out and she can't try again for another hour.
Paul, I think we get the issue.
Yeah, so there you go. So that's the issue.
So as a question of issue management, I don't know whether it's a better idea to try to reopen the existing issue or to create a new one. But what is the proposed resolution?
Well, there was I think my proposed resolution in the issue that I raised would either that this was addressed one way or another, that the status message was changed, or that the status message could be removed altogether in the event of inline form errors module being enabled. There is possibly another option actually, which was raised in reply to my issue, and this has been discussed before, and that's that it's possible within the inline form errors module to disable it for certain forms. And it has been suggested before that it isn't enabled on the user login form. And I've got some comments about this before where it was discussed in an unrelated issue. And again, the accessibility team being involved, where they've expressed that they have no objection to it being disabled on the user login form. So I think there's, you know, potentially sort of 3 different resolutions to this there, really.
So I was thinking of this, and I'm glad you sort of discussed those resolutions, because I was trying to think how on earth do you sort of resolve this while keeping inline errors enabled. And I'm actually reminded of another issue where I think it was discussed at one of these meetings, but I might be wrong, with the date time form element, where if you have a sort of it sort of has two individual fields, multiple individual fields, and the same kind of thing was happening where I think in that case the error was being displayed multiple times for each field. And I think looking at these sort of the proposal solutions, that for this kind of form, I mean, it's just a login form, it's got two fields. I almost think it makes sense to just do the resolution that's on your screen and sort of disable it for the user login form, because we don't actually want to tell people which is wrong, like if it's the username or password. Generally speaking, I wouldn't think we'd want to indicate to them it's the username, it's the password, you know. So I think actually there, you know, it makes sense to indicate that it's one or the other, but not say which one, which logically means that then you don't highlight a field and display the error line, you just display the error above the form. So I think this almost seems like, it to me at least seems like the most sensible resolution, and probably the one with the sort of least barrier to entry, is just to disable it on the user login form.
Yeah, here I'm just highlighting post number 72 by Andrew McPherson, who's involved with the accessibility team, who makes a point of saying that they've got, you know, it's only a two-field form, and he's personally got no objection to it being disabled there.
So the usual usability questions are whether the feedback is first noticeable, and then whether it directs the user to the correct action.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think disabling inline form errors seems like a good solution from that point of view. That we will see.
Sorry, Benji.
We'll see that there's an error, and we won't be misdirected. We won't be directed, but then there are two fields, and we don't know which one was wrong. So yeah, I agree that that disabling inline form errors for the login form seems like the right thing to do.
Do you mind if I say a little something, or don't want to
Please.
interrupt? So I feel guilty, and I'm going to like assume that what I'm about to say we ignore. But from an experience perspective, I am actually for users really not a big fan of the error that's in black at the top. And so by disabling the inline form, correct me if I'm wrong, that means that where it says exclamation mark unrecognized username and password right now, and it highlights the username box, we're moving it up to the top of the page. And for almost every other application website that I've been to, Drupal's like unique in doing, like it makes it look like there is a website error when it throws it to the top rather than highlighting. Now, the issue that I see from my perspective is it's still highlighting username. So it kind of implies that the username is wrong even in this image, because it's not, there's not like the red line is around the username box. There's not something that's highlighting username and password. Both could be wrong looking at this particular image. But I've not been a fan of user issues or user errors, things that they're doing wrong, showing up in a space that typically is telling you the website is doing something wrong. And it's just, I don't think we can do anything about it. I think it would require rethinking a lot of things, because none of the three solutions really address what the overall appearance of this interface is. So I just wanted to lodge the concern that I like the experience of seeing the username where the error is, because it ties the two things together. But again, that is a visual thing. I don't know what it means from an accessibility standpoint. It's just you're forcing someone to look to the top of the page, and when those errors occur, it a lot of times means there's a Drupal problem. It's a much broader issue. It's not just something with a form. So.
In reply to that, if I may, I think the should say that this behaviour is when inline form errors is enabled.
Right.
When it's not enabled, which is the in the case of a standard Drupal installation,
yep.
We're still drawn to the taskbar, and we've still got the red highlighting going on, but the it is the it's the default behavior to have this status message here.
Yep, and then that's what I disagree with. Like the default behavior for me makes it look this like I personally prefer seeing a form error next to the form rather than something that throws to the top of the page. But none of these three proposed solutions solve that. I just wanted to state it so that it's kind of on the record, and then I'll stand back and say, let's go with disabling it on the login form, because I think that is by far the simplest solution for the most immediate reward, because the way it is currently behaving with inline form or enabled, like that doesn't make any sense. It shouldn't just say username. But I think there's a bigger issue in that, because both username and password are failing, it shouldn't just be highlighting username. Like there's a broader issue in the behavior. It's not highlighting a pair of fields. The behavior is still only highlighting a single field. So it is potentially possible that someone who's visually inspecting this form, they would think the username was what was wrong. So despite the fact that the words are saying username or password, it still gives a visual cue that says only the username is wrong. And not everyone's going to come to that conclusion, but I know I've done that behavior myself in the past, in not necessarily in Drupal, but there have been forms where I look at what the cues are in what I'm seeing, and I react to those cues, not just what the error says on the page. So it's an incorrect assumption, but it is one that's possible to come to.
I think I do agree with what you're saying generally, and I'm kind of curious actually, as a sort of developer, I'd love to do a deep dive into that logic and figure out what is actually causing what assumptions were made that we should highlight username. Is it because these two fields are not, I might be wrong here, but they're, from what I understand, they're not like, well, actually, I don't even know. Maybe they're just standard form elements. Maybe they have no relationship to the actual, entity layer of the user entity. In which case, maybe it's more flexible. We could address that in a better way. So no, I'm just kind of saying I'd be interested to do a bit of a deeper dive into, just bouncing off of what you were just saying there, around why in the first place we just highlight username, and if there was a technical constraint that caused that or something, or it was just a choice that someone made back in 10 years ago, or how old's Drupal now? I don't know, 15 years ago. But yeah, I think there's potentially we're sort of working into a fundamentally bigger issue here as well.
Yeah, I think that this is fundamentally the same issue that we had with the date time fields, where there is a start date and an end date. And in both cases, you have two related fields, and one or both of them is wrong. And the inline form errors module doesn't have any way to deal with that situation. I think these are just two unrelated form fields as far as the form API is concerned. So yeah, I think that a broader approach would be to find some way to deal with that situation, some way for the inline form errors module to know that two fields are related and that an error could be in either one of them. But for the current issue, I don't see any reason not to say that we're improving things, not fixing everything, but making an improvement by disabling inline form errors for the login form.
Agreed.
There are larger questions of whether the standard region for for messages is the right place to put form errors. There are larger questions of how inline form errors should deal with related fields. But I think the proposed resolution for this issue fixes some problems.
Definitely agreed. Thank you for listening to my spiel, and thank you, Aaron, for like positively like it's really nice to be validated that way. And if you want to look into it and wanted to bounce things off of me, that would be awesome. But I think that a short-term fix, like even if it's not for this form, there may be other forms or other situations that need that a similar ability to disable things would be a potentially valid fix for. So it gives very immediate value, but a longer investigation would be helpful. So that it would be cool both ways.
I also realized Christina joined us sort of, I think, halfway through the discussion. Christina, did you have any input here at all? In addition to what Steve said?
No, because I've missed half of the initial conversation, and I'm not. I don't have 100% of the context, so I'm just trying to catch some parts and figure out exactly and actually reading the issue.
Okay, it's getting close to 1:30. I'd like to move on to another issue. Christina, you mentioned that you'd like some feedback on one. Would you like to share your screen?
Yeah, 1 second that I open everything. Wasn't prepared.
So just while Christina's getting prepared, just so we're clear, we're recommending. Do you think we should open a new issue to address this, or would it be sensible to repurpose the issue that got previously closed?
The old
I
issue.
forget. Does everyone have the ability to reopen?
No, it would just be those with maintainer responsibilities, I think.
But isn't that also on what was a contrib module, but it's been moved into core? Or is that issue on the core?
I think it would be.
Oh, it is on core. Okay, yeah, it is. Oh no, that's the.
Let's worry about that offline. I'd like to move on to another issue. Christina, we can see your screen.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So basically, this issue it's been open like for a while now. Basically, it started with some feedback that we had because some people wanted to customize several things. Like I think the first things that they said was like the spacing and padding for because we've actually added a lot of space between elements in Claro. So it came from the desire from some people to have less space so they could fit more content on the screen. And later on, we started getting feedback from other parts. So we came up with this set of things that people were asking. And this set of things, we ended up classifying them between three different nature of the request. So, for example, we have this.
I'm sorry, Christina. For the recording, can you read in the issue number?
Yes, it's 3067273.
Thanks.
So basically, we came up with this idea. Well, it's just something that it was obvious that we needed a form to customize things. Several of them, so like for example, one was the palette. Like if someone wanted something that was based on the red instead of blue or green or something like that. Also, well, the accent color. The accent color will be like only the buttons, but then create a whole palette like that was using other colors. Obviously, the dark mode, and then other accessibility settings like disabling motion. We actually don't have a lot of things actually with any kind of animation right now, but the plan is to have them in the future, or for example, the high contrast mode. And although at the beginning we were discussing to have one form for all these things, we saw that we had three options. A few of them were for the whole site, or something that the site builder could decide, like for example, the padding on tables or something like that, or for example, the palette and the accent color, because for example, the brand the logo is green, so you will have the accent color green, so all the buttons will be green. But then there were other things like accessibility related things that the user should decide by him or herself. And then other things like decreasing the padding or things like that could end up at some point being something decided by components, not only for the whole thing. So yes, those are the three ones that we decided. So actually, Andrew suggested that the font resize shouldn't be something that we should give right now, because browsers nowadays have enough options to do that. And what I was looking from this call is some other opinions, either yes, we agree on whatever you're saying, or no, we think that everything should be on the appearance page, for example, or what do you think? What other people think on this call? Because what we need is other people's feedback. As you can see, most of the opinions are from the Claro team.
I'm just laughing that I commented in the issue already, but I don't remember what I commented. So I was just reading your screen to see what I commented in. And what I actually said is what I was just about to say, that perhaps the color module is no longer fit for purpose, I guess, and potentially we could, because this is of course not something that is unique to Claro. This is something that I presume a lot of themes would want to, these kind of general settings, be able to customize on the theme, for the site wide, or give the user some control, or have some palettes that you could pick between, and now that we have something like post CSS and core, things like palettes and things become a bit more modern and easier, I guess, to implement. So again, I don't know too much about post CSS. I don't know if you could simply rebuild the whole CSS on a cache clear, for instance, but I think there is something fundamental here in that the color module was developed a long time ago, still in core. Perhaps it could be a more holistic approach could be done to look at,
yes, there is
something like that,
There is an issue for that. Non-GORDs in Drupal. There is actually a core idea for replacing the color module with a new, least technical solution to replace it with CSS variables and using palettes and everything. So there is this. Yeah. So probably
one of the things I like about the sort of the idea of us defining this thing called a palette is that if we define this concept, potentially, you make it possible for other themes to provide, through the plugin system, provide palettes for another theme. Like I know the theme, I think it's called Gin, is builds on Claro. Like say Claro came with 5 or 6 palettes, but the Gin theme could be like provide a whole other set of palettes that through the plugin system could just be imported directly into Claro, for instance. So I think there's a lot of potential for something like this, and this is maybe not necessarily the right forum right now to discuss the intricacies of something like plugin palette plugins and all that stuff. But no, I think there's definitely some potential with something like this.
Nice. Well, that's that's about the palette and the accent color. But for example, the dark mode, it was mentioned that it should be something that the user should be able to decide, and not the site builder or the site owner. So if anybody has any other feedback, it could be great to have more people giving some
I'm all
thoughts.
for this, actually. In fact, only yesterday I put in a feature request for Gin theme to have a user controllable density setting. I think with both Claro and Gin, there's a lot of visual space in the theme, and certainly for site editors, I think that's a welcome improvement. But I think from a site builder basis, sometimes that can be problematical, especially when you're dealing with menu trees and large table drag rows and that kind of thing. And the facility to have much more compact table rows would be advantageous quite a lot of the time for a site builder. So yes, I'm all for this.
As you were talking there, something occurred to me that, you know, it's really easy for a theme, and we make it really easy for a theme to provide the sort of the theme settings, you know, that appear when you go into appearance and in settings. What we don't do, that I'm aware of, is that we don't provide the way for that same behavior to happen on the user edit form. So, for instance, I'm envisioning a scenario where a theme could, much like they do for theme settings, could within a sort of supported way, could just provide a bunch of settings on the user form that the user could then use to tweak how they see the theme.
So
Yeah, I was thinking along the same lines, that you have your 3 levels of settings here. Sort of the easiest one is the theme settings on the appearance page, and that should be fairly straightforward to implement. The per user settings, as Aaron said, would presumably go on the user edit form, and we would want to keep that really simple, like dark mode on or off, density high, medium, low.
I'm not sure if density should be something that users should decide, because users, if you're talking about a site builder, that's something, but if you're talking about a content author, it's a completely different story.
Okay.
Controls
But
all
then the third one is settings per component. And I think the way that would have to work is you'd have to implement some sort of plugin system so that each component can add something to the site settings form. So that seems to me like
that's something that could be maybe done with CSS variables also. I mean, you have you have a spacing system where you define several sizes, and then you decide either size 1 or size 2. I mean, obviously not that simple, but it could be addressed maybe with CSS. But yes, settings will be something needed anyway.
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking, are we just going to have one settings form where all the logic lives for what those settings are, or is each component going to have some information that's then aggregated into the site settings form? But I guess that would appear on the site settings form in the end, wouldn't it?
Good question.
I guess I'm just like Drupal's historically never really had I don't think we've ever really defined what a component is when it comes to theming. I think there's some issues to look at, kind of like modernizing the theme system and component-based theming, but like when you're saying component, like are you referring to something like tangible right now in Drupal, or do you mean component in the abstract sort of thing?
That's a really good question that we should define, actually. I have my idea, but this is something that needs to be discussed.
I think that when I see this, I also have questions around order of precedence. So I would probably list, because it almost feels like, what happens if a setting was set at the site level? Is it overridden at the component level, or is it overridden at the user level? Like which is the final decision in how the site behaves? So we need to not just look at them from each thing independent of the others, but we need to understand how we want the settings to relate as they cascade across those domains. So having a good definition of what exists in all, can an element like dark mode, can you set that in all three areas? Is dark mode configurable? So is that something that actually represents a set of settings? And so in that way, it would potentially impact what was happening at the component or theme level. So to me, it feels like this is not, we're not being very systematic in how we're approaching it right now. We may need to do that if we want to get a predictable behavior.
Yeah, I think the logic sort of order would suggest that, like, if the user overrides something that was set at a theme level, then it's over in, I mean, that would take precedent for that user. But then how you deal with that, like do you inject some CSS overrides into the head of every page, and then how does caching behave? Because sometimes we cache pages or elements and they're not cached for that user. Does caching become a lot more complicated?
Right.
These are the kind of things that are how far does this discussion go? It's
Probably not on
I'm
a
having
UX meeting.
about how much Drupal we have to break.
Right. I think that.
Yeah, go ahead, Thomas.
Oh no, that was just that perfectly encapsulated my concern. I think that what Benji said, I like the idea of things being simple. I know that it is a known, not just known, it's extremely common now for things like dark mode or some of those simple things to occur at the user level. But as Aaron pointed out, I think there's a lot of not necessarily fully considered consequences of making that. From a caching perspective, that is a huge issue, because we don't want to have 50 different versions of the same pages being cached, because that could be real nice.
I think dark mode's a really interesting one, because you even go a step deeper and say, well, sometimes that's just defined at the session level. Even anonymous users could have dark mode on and off. And I think sometimes there's now, I might be wrong, but I think there's now support in browsers to like a browser can tell the site the user wants dark mode.
Are you really saying that it's not just changing a color? Come on, it should be.
You know what? I miss the old days of the web where it was all just plain text. I don't know.
No, but what you said, Thomas, about which should be more important at the end, the user or the site owner, or whatever choice. I think it's a really important topic to have on this issue, because we really need to consider that, and we really need to evaluate that.
And I guess also additionally, when it comes to the per component, are we sacrificing site builder usability for site builder flexibility? So it would be really awesome to have it on a component, but if we end up with everything that's been defined as a component suddenly having its form choices showing up on the same form, it could be easily extremely overwhelming. And I don't know if that's something that we would even want to visualize in the site. Maybe it's something that you would set up from a code level where, okay, you can have a configuration file to set it up, but are we decreasing the usability for site builders by making it too flexible?
Yeah.
I think in most real world scenarios, with sort of modern design systems and all that, things like pattern labs, you like typically a component is a pretty strictly defined thing as to this is a component, this is how it looks, this is how it behaves. And quite often I might be wrong, but in most cases you wouldn't usually, especially if you're working under like a corporate design system, you would be given very little, if no, flexibility on how that's presented. And especially in a corporate environment, like for good reason, because the organization wants its corporate style, so it doesn't want you changing too much as an individual developer. But generally, any settings like that would be exposed as like variables in SAS or on some kind of configuration in code. So I think practically speaking, the discussion around like providing configurations to define, to expose styling per component is interesting. I'm not sure, like in the sort of, like, at least in a corporate environment, how much you would take advantage of that though.
Maybe the compromise solution would be to say that you define what a component is, and then that but not all components are equal. So if within Drupal core today, we said we identified 40 different components that were well defined, maybe you create an exception that says, okay, for these 3 things, one of which is media or key elements where we know there's a desired behavior, but for most, like, rather than it in one size fits all, saying all components behave the same way, we make it exception based. And we say for things where we really want that flexibility to have the form customizable settings, we identify those components. They are all equal in how they've been defined, and we know how those behaviors are expected to behave in terms of precedence or overrides. Does that make sense, or am I being crazy?
Okay. No, makes sense. I was wondering if several of you could actually put your comments on the issue, so at least it's not only a few of us that comment in there.
Sure, definitely.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think there's a really interesting discussion, as we've sort of highlighted. There's a lot of different considerations to even just expose some user level settings. But I think it's something I think it's a discussion that's worth having. It's not going to be an easy discussion, and it's probably sure as hell not going to be an easy solution, but it's a conversation worth having, I think.
Cool. So I have to drop now, but I have another meeting. But thank you all, and I hope I can stay a little bit longer next week.
We will leave some comments on the issue.
Okay, thank you.
And Aaron, did you want to revisit something we talked about last week, the book module issue?
Yeah, it was really just to see if we should add a description to the field. So as well as making the title of that form checkbox, making the title like.
Do you have the issue open? Can you share your screen?
Yeah, bear with me 1 second. I'm just gonna get it open.
So I think the issue you're talking about is 2803187. Allow book navigation title to be overridden by top level node title.
Yep, and let me I'll just share my screen. Although I think this is the right one. Nope, this is the right one. Is this the right one? Hopefully this is the right screen. Okay. Yeah, it's essentially so we looked at this issue last week, and I'll just pop down to the bottom because I think there are, yes, some screenshots. Yeah, we looked at so yeah, it was proposed to use the instead of basically to call the checkbox sort of book title instead of I think that was instead of use top level page. So we would use book title as block title. If look at, because I think there's screenshots where, yeah, so there's these screenshots here. So there's this one, for instance. So this will be use book title as block title. But I just wondered if we needed like a description, like how this field, this checkbox above it has, or this radio button has a description element, just so that if it makes sense on its own, or if it makes sense to, if it needs any further kind of clarification. Like I was thinking, like for instance, because we have a title field here where we can change, where we can set the block title, but then we'll have a checkbox that'll say sort of use book title as block title. So I wonder if we just need a bit of a description that clarifies exactly what is like that's going to change in the context of, you know, the user is on a book page kind of thing, or if we think that's fine on its own.
So on the one hand, the general principle is that less is more,
Yeah.
and we shouldn't say something unless we actually have something to say. So use book title as block title. I guess a short description would be something like, if selected, then the title entered above will be overridden by the book title.
Yeah, I think something like that would be, yeah, that sounds fine. Is that probably that was kind of just what I wanted to clarify, if people, yeah, if we felt that it made sense to add a kind of description like that, so that's fine. I can pop that into the issue.
Yeah, I'm not sure that it's needed, but I would like to have some feedback from actual users on that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, if that's fine. If there's no other feedback in here, then that's happy to leave it at that. But I'll put something into the issue below your comment.
I'm ambivalent. I love explanations, but that particular region of the configuration, it's already really busy with how many words go with the show block only on book pages. Like, I think that the takeaway from what from your question is that it's inconsistent to have this really long description of show block only on book pages, which to me is very self-evident, and not to do it for other things. So it's like, I don't know why we have so many. Yeah. I could see it going both ways. I think what Benji gave as an example kind of highlights why it might be repetitive.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like, if we could find words that explained concepts that didn't make sense to users, then it would be helpful to have the description. But if all it does is restate what's already in that short description there, we don't need to restate something that's already been said, would be my statement.
I think I'm in agreement with Thomas, actually. It depends entirely upon what language is used for the label. If that's good enough, it's repetitive, I think.
Yeah, so the one that settled on the Velocity was basically changing from top level page to just say book. So use book title as block title, which to me makes perfect sense. I think yeah, and probably, I guess that was the thing. I like Benji, what you said about like getting actual users' feedback, because as a technical person, that makes sense to me. But I wonder if it makes sense to people who are less familiar with the sort of inner workings of Drupal and what a book is.
So
or how about this? How about use book title as title, and maybe even capitalize title to match the label that it's given in the text area or text field.
Hmm.
Or use book title instead of title.
Is title on its own too ambiguous? Unless, I mean, capitalizing it to look, does that reference this one enough? Hmm. I think, personally, I think that the proposed sort of, I guess the sort of actual title for the field that was proposed in the last meeting was fine. I think, yeah, I guess if we, it kind of sounds like that we maybe don't need to add any more description, because if we try to add any more description, we might just be restating what's already there without, you know, as Thomas said, without sort of adding anything of value. But yeah.
It's open to can of
Could
worms.
I suggest that rather than saying block title, you might say block heading, and that way you're not, you know, repeating the title thing too much and run risk of people confusing which title we're talking about.
I don't think, at least I wouldn't necessarily have tied block heading to the title field that's in the form we're looking at right now.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if behaviorally, like, we've opened a can of worms in that I'm now thinking, when I check this box, if I'm taking the book title to replace that title field, shouldn't that title field indicate that state change in some way? Like right now it's editable and you can write something into that.
Yeah.
Is there a behavior that should be accompanying? And again, I don't know if we want to open an issue on this. It's just in my mind as I play it out, there is a linkage between title and that checkbox. When you do it, you're saying whatever you put in that block where it says block navigation right now, that's actually going to be replaced with a book title.
Yeah.
And so
I think it being down here probably doesn't help.
Yeah.
In any way. It possibly should be actually be at the very least underneath the display title checkbox.
That would actually solve both problems, because by grouping it with the title, then it's very, very clear. If you say use book title as title, and it's under display title and in kind of that title domain, it's very clear that it's all part of the same thing, rather than looking like it's part of the book navigation block display instructions.
Although, here's a thought, and I don't know if we want to start hacking at the at the block configuration form on, I don't know, but instead of the display title as a single checkbox, maybe we have, much like below it, we have a set of radio buttons. It's like one is just display title, one is display title, or like display book title as title, and another one is display like nothing, because those are kind of, I mean, probably better words, but like those are kind of like all linked together in what's going to ultimately end up being shown to the user, whether it's like the title that's here, whether it's nothing, or whether it's a contextually relevant title on the block.
Keep in mind the implementation. Currently, the option we're discussing, use book title as block title, that only appears if you select show block only on book pages.
Yes. Okay.
That's why.
Yeah.
And
okay.
furthermore, you don't have unlimited freedom in rearranging the block configuration form.
Yeah.
So display title is a standard option that's available on every block.
Yeah, maybe we shouldn't go breaking that.
Yeah.
You've got to keep it within the block display. Now, it's possible that we could ask for a bigger change to the issue and don't make it dependent on showing the block only on book pages. So if the new option is selected and you are on a book page, then use the book title. And if you're not on a book page, then use the configured title.
Actually, that I'm thinking as a
I'm
site
willing to
builder,
make that suggestion. I'm not willing to say that you have to do it this way.
right? I'm wondering if you're actually drawing an important distinction that it shouldn't be optional, because frequently, at least in my own sites that I've built, if I name a block a particular thing, or I want it to be named a particular thing, I guess the reason they have it this way is that the block title could change if you're in two separate books. Is that
Mhm.
the reason this has been segmented out to only appear as part of block only on book pages? So that essentially, if you've got book navigation that is changing contextually, you want to allow the block title to change contextually. Is that a behavior that was desired, or do we
Yeah,
not know?
I really don't know why it's tied to show block only on book pages. I actually don't know, but if it made sense to disentangle it from that and then sort of move it up to underneath display title, because yeah, like there's no technical reason, presumably, that if we disentangle it from that, if you happen to have this the checkbox checked and set the block to show on all pages, now that I think about it, shouldn't that be under the visibility options? uh, Never mind, separate issue. But yeah, I think that I don't see a technical reason that we could just fall back to displaying, in this case, book navigation if you don't happen to be in a book. Maybe, oh no, wait, because no, maybe there is a reason.
Yeah,
I'm gonna
I
have to
think there is
revisit.
there. I think it makes it so that the block can change when you're in two separate books. Like if you're in book A, it'll show the title of book A. When you're in book B, it shows the title of book B.
I'm also thinking, like, does it, if you have it, if you have a if you have a block set to show block on all pages, I think what that does is it then makes, yeah, I think it makes the block display all of the like the top level links in the block will be all of the top, all of the books essentially will get linked in the block. I don't remember exactly because it's been a while since I have personally needed this issue, but yeah, it's going to be it's sort of interesting behavior. Maybe there is a sort of a need to fundamentally revisit the approach of like all of like each of these different options.
Yeah.
So we're a little past the hour. Can we wrap this up? Wrap up
Yeah,
this discussion?
yeah, I think so. I don't know if we have a particularly definitive statement from this particular discussion, but because I think we explored quite a few different ideas. So yeah, I'm not really sure what the best way to proceed with it would be, but yeah, I think we've probably discussed all we can at the moment with it, at least.
Okay. Thanks. I'll post the recording probably later today, and hope to see you again next week.
Thanks,
Great.
Benji.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.